Okay, we got a great interview lined up here with Dr. Mario Beauregard. He's a neuroscientist, an author, and now an activist because he's feeling that push from within to start getting engaged even in a bigger way with what's going on in our world right now. In this conversation that we have here, we're going to be talking about a lot of different things, and he's going to bring his experience as an internationally known consciousness researcher, as well as he's done a lot of research into mystical experiences. So he's got a pretty fascinating background coming into this, and he's even had a lot of his own mystical experiences over the course of time. So he's not just going to bring the the knowledge end, the empirical end of studying this stuff from a scientific perspective, but he's also going to bring the direct experience to the table as we talk about so much of what's going on in our world right now. We're going to get a little bit into transhumanism, we're going to get a little bit into AI, and of course, a lot of the events taking place currently with, various racial challenges that are playing out, as well as, the coronavirus and that sort of stuff, and some of the sort of totalitarian measures we've been seeing come into our current experience here. So let's settle in here and enjoy this interview. That's kind of one of the ways I wanted to start is actually looking at, like, we were having a conversation the other day, and you had said that you're almost going to be, you feel like you have to start focusing on activism as opposed to just, the work you do as a scientist. Mm-hmm. And what drove that statement for you? What made you feel that way?
I'm not only a scientist, I'm a deeply spiritual person, and I've always done meditation, and I've had a series of spiritual experiences throughout my life, and so I'm very well connected through my essence, my spiritual essence, my inner self, higher self, and so I simply received a message. And this was repeated during several days and for a few weeks, that it was time to, get activated and be involved in this crisis, because it represents a huge opportunity in terms of consciousness evolution for the human species. And so I saw exactly, like I said, I'm involved in class action, collective action against the government regarding lockdown, mandatory vaccination, and so on and so forth. And so I made a lot of new friends through social media, and these people sent me a lot of messages, and that's when I realized that we need to create a kind of social network, but sort of alliance between the citizens of the planet that can envision a new world, but the new world that we see, it's totally different than what is presented by the people from the United Nations, for instance.
Yes.
And what some say it's called the so-called New World Order. It's totally different, and so that put sort of pressure on me, and that's why I decided to. I know a lot of people all over the planet with regard to my work as a scientist and an author also, and I realized that right now I'm following alternative media all over the planet, on every continent, and we are making the same reflections all over the planet at the same time. Yeah. We're thinking about the same things, regardless of whether we're Canadians or Americans or, from Congo or, Switzerland, doesn't matter. It's not about the skin color. It's not about divisions, like some people are trying to social engineer in the United States. It's about spiritual evolution, consciousness.
Yeah.
And some people feel that if we're alone, some people, even spiritual people, some of them are afraid, and they don't realize the power that we have. But we're much more numerous than the other camp. They represent zero, perhaps zero, 0.01% of the entire humanity. And I'm not promoting violence. We only have to become awake, a great awakening, like they say in the USA, not right now, and the world can change dramatically, very rapidly,
Yeah.
like it happened during the fall of the Berlin Wall. Even 6 months before that, the experts in political science thought that the Union, Soviet Union, was a huge empire, very powerful, and they didn't see the end of this thing. But all of a sudden, after a few months, all the smaller countries that were part of Soviet Union, the, the young people, especially the young people, they felt that it was time to free themselves from this communist regime, and they started to manifest, walk peacefully in the streets. And after a few months, that was the end of the Soviet Union, without too much violence, really. Yeah, so I'm sure we can do the same thing right now.
Absolutely. And so, you talked about consciousness within that, and it's interesting because when I find one of the things when you talk about consciousness and spirituality is there's different perceptions out there that people perceive things differently. So sometimes people will see consciousness and consciousness transformation as this, oh, we just kind of have to sit and meditate and we just, suddenly the world will just change and all these different things. And other people will look at, the change that's going on and they'll say, hey, we have to go out and we have to fight for change and we need to do all these things. And it seems like it's a combination of the various actions together. So I'm curious to hear from you, like when you look at, what's playing out, and even when you talked about the example of the fall of the Berlin Wall there, consciously, what is happening within people's minds, within their feelings, within their spiritual essence, if you will, that's making them look at their world and say, enough is enough. I'm ready for a change. Like, how would you express that?
Well, it's not been studied scientifically, so I cannot use science to think about what may be going on there. But personally, I would think that it's an impulse that is coming from deep within, from our essence, and I think it's part of our. Individually, we're supposed to have in spiritual hypnosis. I've studied this. Uh, Also, I've studied near-death experiences and so on and so forth. And in spiritual hypnosis, they found that the therapists often found that we have, on an individual basis, we have all sort of soul contract,
Mm-hmm.
a life plan, or a mission, if you will. And I suppose that at this moment, it's a special moment in the human history, and many people feel that they are being activated. And I'm sure that that's what happened during the fall of the Soviet Union, exactly at the same moment. And most of these people who participated, they were young people, students, university students, oftentimes, but also older people. Uh, Not sure that they knew that consciously, that was part of their life plan, but to me, it's very clear that this is the case, and it's many people around the world now are feeling this. Mostly spiritual people.
Mm-hmm.
That we have individual life plans, but also we are participating in something much greater than ourselves, and this seems to be the case collectively, and that's why we need to unite together to be more powerful.
Absolutely, and that's
Mm.
something we can totally connect with here at CE as well. And
Of course.
I I wanna kind of like switch gears a little bit because you mentioned the UN plan, right? A lot of people have been talking about, hey, what's sort of some of the underlying stuff that's going on with, say, COVID-19, for example, and how does this potentially relate to some documents, some ideas that people have found as to what the UN's plan or what the various, sort of New World Order plan is that's playing out, which seems to be one pathway that humanity could choose, but there's also this other pathway. And
Right.
and this you sort of mentioned a little bit where you said bring people together who have a vision for the future that is beautiful, but is not necessarily what the UN might have. So to get into that part of the conversation, I want to kind of bring in first looking at what the UN or these this sort of New World Order agenda, what it has played out, because I know it involves the infrastructure of 5G, but it also involves there's so much discussion of AI, and there's so many this push of transhumanism and high technological advancement. And while that's good in one sense, it also has another side to it. So what have you found in this? Because I know you've looked at this a lot.
Yeah. For about 25 years now. At first, the UN people met in Rio, in Brazil, in 1992, and they created what they call the Agenda 21st for the 21st century. And a few decades later, they started to think about Agenda 2030. So that's their agenda. It's very similar, but now the AI becomes very important in that. And these people are backed financially by the central bankers. So the Rockefellers, Rothschilds, and so on and so forth are all involved in this. And they believe that we need a very significant depopulation for the United Nations to reach its goals. And they want to save nature. But for them, and I've spoken at I've been invited at the United Nations 12 years ago, and I met some of these people. And I can tell you that they see us as insects. They call us useless eaters, and for them, we are the cancer with regard to planet Earth, and we need to be removed at about 90%. They would like to eliminate 85 to 90% of the population, and you can find what they are planning to do on the so-called Georgia Guidestones in the suburb of Atlanta, Georgia. It's right there. It's very clear. At first, when they created Agenda 21, they were not discussing that overtly. But during the last year, with this so-called COVID crisis, they have started to talk more openly about that. And so for instance, Bill Gates is part of this cabal, and he recognized that when you administer a vaccine, it will kill a certain number of people, but that's fine. He gave a TED talk about this for 17 minutes, and he was proposing at least a reduction of 15% of the people on the planet. But some more extreme members of this dark cabal, they would like a depopulation of about 85, 90%. And the other people, so that's part of the agenda, and they want to eliminate paper money, credit cards, and so on. So through the vaccine, this vaccine is the first one of its kind, because it will modify us. It would modify us genetically, exactly like Monsanto, for instance, is doing with crops. And it's not very healthy for us to eat these things, and it certainly wouldn't be healthy for us to receive the chip, because it's part of nanotechnology, and it would transform our DNA.
Let's just backtrack for 1 second there. So I know this is when we're talking with Bill Gates about he talks about the nano chip that he wants to put underneath the skin. You're saying he would want to administer that with the vaccine? This ID card 2020 sort of thing?
Exactly. He has a patent for this, and that's part of it will come this fall and this winter. That's why they are talking about the second wave of the coronavirus. Even if there's no coronavirus or COVID-19, they will still try to administrate the vaccine. So, for instance, Justin Trudeau has ordered 37 million doses of these vaccines, and the United States, they have over 300 million doses.
Yeah, that's
That's
a
been
full
confirmed by
population.
Trump. And Trump said at some point, I like him, but he said, if necessary, the military will go to the people and will take care of that for those who want to receive. So to come back to the plan of the so-called dark cabal, it's a very significant reduction of the population. It's also a destruction of they want to destroy the middle class economically, and we see that already with the participation of the prime ministers and the presidents of various countries. And after that, they would it would be like in 1984. So you will be totally dependent on the state. And with technology, they are planning to create a totalitarian state based on technology and also, under the control of the richest people on the planet.
Well, it's interesting because like I would imagine in as you research as a scientist exploring consciousness and all these sorts of things, it appears as though there's this like one underlying field that everything is made of, and here on Earth we've been playing with this idea of polarity and duality so much, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and as we awaken to this greater sense of oneness consciousness, this greater sense of connectedness, it's almost like the height of that duality, that polarity, is coming up in our conscious awareness so much to say like, look, this is what you're playing with right now. Do you believe that the world beyond sort of this duality is one of oneness consciousness, and that we're sort of going through this experience to overcome this long-held journey of duality?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I do believe that because I had several major spiritual experiences throughout my life, including a near-death experience when I was 20 years old. And I can tell you that I've experienced these levels of being and consciousness and reality. So I know that's the ultimate destination. But in order to get there, we have to go through, like you're saying, a period very intense, and we'll see, battles between two different camps and a lot of chaos socially, and we see that already, especially in the United States, but elsewhere also on the planet. And, if we're here at this moment on our planet, it's because we have to take action. We have to get involved.
Yeah.
We all play some roles at some level.
And so continuing with this agenda, right? Continuing with the idea of the transhumanism and getting the chip through the vaccine, or however they decide to move in this direction. What else have you found with regards to the transhumanism agenda?
Well, transhumanism, it's for the people who may not be aware, it's the philosophical view that we need to transform, enhance human beings. In terms of their bodies and also their brains. And to do that, they propose to use very sophisticated technologies like implants, for instance, or AI and other stuff like that. And they are firmly, they firmly believe that by 2030, or some say 2040, will become, a part of humanity will become cyborgs, and will go there on that path, and others will refuse. But if they do, like me, for instance, I'll be considered as a second-class citizen. I will look like a chimp compared to us, for instance, in terms of intellectual power. That's what Elon Musk, for instance, is saying. The owner of Tesla and SpaceX. He owns another company, Neuralink. So, and it's almost ready. They have been building a neural interface, a brain implant, for the last few years. And so he's going to propose by the end of this year. At first, it will be with clinical patients to help them create what they call the mind-brain interface. So For instance, people experiencing the so-called locked-in syndrome, they cannot move their limbs. With that in their brain, they could activate a computer. They can take control of a keyboard. They can make open a door, things like that, through their motor cortex activity, through imagination, visualization, and so that's fine. And it's a technology that exists, that's been existing for the last 20 years. So that you have good applications, but ultimately, what he wants to do, and other guys like him at the Silicon Valley, and the cabal people, the dark cabal people, they want to upgrade themselves. They believe that they will be extremely powerful intellectually and even physically. So they would like to become cyborgs. And if they do that, they will look at us like domestic pets or things like that. And there are various levels in terms of AI. So you have a weak form of AI that you find in personal assistants like Alexa, smartphones, drones, stuff like that. You have another level where you can match the intellectual capacities of humans with robots, and we're almost there right now. And there's another level eventually that they call super intelligence. So the androids, or even a network through a supercomputer, would be infinitely more intelligent than the most brilliant minds of humans. And such an intelligence, not guided by any emotion, without any compassion, could eventually lead to the destruction of humankind.
Mm-hmm.
And they believe that. Elon Musk is aware of that, but still he wants to take the chance. And it's a big gamble. And now we have more and more scientists opposing this view, and trying to convince politicians all over the planet that the research and the development of, for instance, human robots looking like humanoid robots, it should be regulated at the public level. So the governments themselves, like the Army, DARPA in the United States, they need to be regulated, controlled to a certain extent. Otherwise, it's becoming very different or very dangerous for the future of humanity. And the same thing for the private sector. Because it could be eventually dangerous for us, all of us. And also, there are many problems with this idea because they will have to solve many difficulties. For instance, if you want to implant something in the brain, it's likely that you may get an infection, and there are technical problems around this. And another point is that these guys, these computer guys, they're not neuroscientists or psychologists, and so they believe that you can reduce mental processes and consciousness simply to information processing. Mm-hmm. And so they are convinced that you can transfer mental processes, thoughts, beliefs, conscious states into supercomputers eventually. Now this is not possible, but they believe that, but they are not. They do not realize that a thought is not physical. It is associated with physical processes in the brain, with chemical processes, electrical processes, but the thought itself is non-physical. You cannot isolate it physically. But now they are promising us that we'll be able to reach immortality by downloading us through a supercomputer. But it's not. This is not a sound idea from a neuroscientific point of view. Not at all. It's not feasible, and so in the near future, I want to expose all of this because there are a lot of myths related to this field, and these guys they have something to sell, of course. want to sell big ideas, projects, and so. But they are talking about many things they don't really know, and it's very obvious when you hear them that they don't know what they're talking about. And so I want to let people know about this and also the possible dangers of
Right.
this. Yeah.
So the idea of taking one's consciousness is essentially it's the very idea that it sort of goes back to the whole chicken and egg discussion. Where does consciousness originate? Does it originate within the brain, or does it originate outside the brain? And I think from a scientific perspective, correct me if I'm wrong here, but they still haven't sort of locked in exactly what the consensus is on that. It's still being explored. However,
Yes.
a lot of the non-material science does point to the fact that consciousness does originate outside the brain.
Yes.
And
Yes, it's gaining traction. The non-materialist view about consciousness now, it's really becoming more recognized, and you have people like even Koch, Christoph Koch, who was working with Francis Crick, one of the greatest materialists of all times. He was a student, and at first in his career, at the beginning of his career, he was convinced he was a materialist. But now he's saying, no, consciousness is primary. It doesn't need a physical substrate to exist. And you see that in philosophy of mind. Also, many philosophers are changing camps.
Mm-hmm.
Before, it was not possible to say that openly, publicly, because it was considered a dogma that the brain creates consciousness, like other organs create hormones or stuff like that. But during the last 10 years, it has started to change quite significantly.
Do you feel that like a lot of the desire behind this idea for transhumanism or living forever, for example, this idea of immortality, do you think it comes from the materialist point of view that the moment the brain dies, you die, and therefore if we can transfer the brain, so it's almost like a fear we're dealing with, a fear of our own mortality?
Oh yeah, these guys say that openly, like the guys at Google, Zuckerberg. So yes, they own billions of dollars. I suppose they enjoy their lives and they don't want it to finish. But yes, they are materialists.
Right.
So they don't have a clue that consciousness does not disappear, vanish after physical death, and they don't believe that at all.
And
they are fearful.
Right. And so, that's a layer of consciousness. That's a level of consciousness. It's very sort of limited material, sort of almost like strictly 3D version of consciousness, or maybe even 2D, if you will. It's me and the world, and that's that's what's there. And whereas when we go back to this consciousness evolution, this evolution of our thought, of our mind, of who we are, and I've had many mystical experiences myself too, so I can relate to a lot of what you shared. And it's almost like, well, the view of reality that we've had for so long, which is that it's us in this physical world, and it's almost like it's just material. That's all it is. It seems to be shifting more and more and more. And I'm curious, like, when you have looked at the near-death experience research, when you've kind of really dove into this, what have you found in terms of what happens at the point of death, or what happens to consciousness after it exits the physical body?
Well, yes. So there's a part of our consciousness that is more physical. So some researchers call it the physical consciousness, and this is so it's related to biological needs and primary psychological needs, and all of this disappear when you experience physical death, even for a few minutes during clinical death, for instance. So this physical portion that interests the guys of Silicon Valley, it doesn't last for long. And so there's another form of consciousness that takes over, and it's in form, we could say, an extra cerebral form of consciousness. And it's people realize who they are really, and so their identity is not related at all to their physical body. They realize that, and so they are more connected with their spiritual essence, their self, their ultimate self, and that's a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's the case of clinical death and they are reanimated after a few minutes, the physical consciousness has a tendency to vanish a bit in these people after that, and it can last for several years. So it's becoming less important, less powerful, less in control, and these people become transformed psychologically and spiritually very often.
Yeah, so from what I'm hearing here, it's almost like a layer of who you think you are, which is,
Right.
let's say, a very limited way of seeing reality, not necessarily right or wrong, just a limited way, begins to dissipate and it's almost like a veil begins to come
Right.
thinner and thinner and thinner, and you can see in more, more experience who you truly are while you're still in the physical body. And this is an interesting idea because we talk so much, especially right now, right? We talk so much about the importance of our physical identity, right? We're having, as a collective, we're having a racial dance that we're playing right now, where we're coming to the surface, all these ideas, all these beliefs, all these things that we've had, which have been a real part of our history, but it's almost like it's coming up again to be like, is this who you truly are? Is this your essence? And can our true essence come through, where that veil of paying so much attention to our physical body begins to dissipate? And from what I'm hearing is people who have had these mystical experiences, that veil does thin greatly. Does someone need to have that physical experience to I guess you could say, shift their consciousness, elevate their consciousness to see that?
Yes, but not necessarily through the death process. So some people will reach states of consciousness like these during meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it comes spontaneously without any apparent reason. I've received letters from people all over the planet telling me that, even if they are not truly spiritual before that, religious. There are also class of sacred substances that you can take. What we understand now is that it's like your brain is like an interface for more refined levels for layers of consciousness. But it's like a TV station. Usually, you are programmed to reach all the certain number of frequencies or channels. And you don't know that there are hundreds or thousands of other channels or planes of existence possible. But eventually, you can have an experience in which there will be an alteration of your brain chemistry. Like I said, can happen during a meditative state, can happen spontaneously, or you can take a substance, can be a ritual, clinical death, or there are many, many possibilities. But when you have this electrochemical shift, then you become aware of other frequencies or other aspects, planes of reality. Mm-hmm. So your view is expanding, your reality is expanding.
Yeah.
And but it's not necessary to undergo physical death to have access to this. And now it seems that more and more people on the planet are living this, and you are more awake. And so that's why I'm saying that all the social institutions that exist presently, very soon they won't be adequate. They won't fit with the new perceptions of humanity. A large portion of humanity.
Yeah, it's like our physical world, our society was built out of a certain level of consciousness that matched the one where, hey, it's all about our physical identity, it's all about this. And as we expand that, it's like, well, it no longer computes. And it's why there's so many of us, like you said it earlier on, that feel this desire, that feel this push to want to change things, because it's like my consciousness and the world out there, they don't match. and I know we're capable of something so much more. And I don't share a lot yet on CE. I don't know why, but of the experiences that I've had, and of generally a lot of the mystical stuff that goes on in my own personal life. But it's like I recall, and you may have had something similar, but it's like I remember I was about 10 years ago, 11 years ago, when I was first starting Collective Evolution. I started to do a lot more exploratory work into my consciousness and all this sort of stuff, and I literally remember like a point where I had finished doing some sessions of just exploring, letting go different programs and all these different things that I had within myself. And it was like a switch flipped, if you will. And all of a sudden, like, I just didn't, it's hard to explain. It's hard to put into words, but it's like my physical body was nothing more than I walk into a car and I drive the car. And that's it. Like, there's no, oh my God, this car is me. This car is who I am. This car is like, I need to put everything about this car, like how I dressed. All these things started to just, it was like, hey, I'll wear this shirt today. And that's it. But the shirt doesn't represent who I am. The shirt isn't and when that switch flipped, it was like this expansion, this understanding of, oh, this is who I really am. I remember this. I remember this feeling. And so much of my life since then has been about sort of living through that. And so I think from what I'm hearing you say too, is it's like, and this is kind of the foundation of so much of what we do. And so it's awesome to hear it from what you found in your scientific research as well. But it's like humanity is really going through this process where we are going to be living this new state of consciousness on an everyday basis.
Right. And so we have to, the world has to change in terms of the institutions and politics, economy, and we need something totally transformed that fit with these experiences and this expansion of consciousness that more and more people are going through.
Yeah.
So I realized by looking at people from various alternative media all over the planet that now more and more people are realizing that, for instance, the government is not necessarily your friend, and that perhaps at this point of our evolution, maybe we don't need governments, the traditional forms of governing anymore. We need new forms of governance.
Yeah.
And perhaps even a global form of governance. I am also I'm a globalist, but I'm a spiritual. So I'm not talking about the same global than the other camp.
Right.
But I think that we have to go through, when you have these experiences, you realize that frontiers are artificial on the planet. And when you take the plane or you go into space, you look at the planet. And so I think we have to transcend these barriers, geopolitical barriers, because they are artificial. They reflect history, but it doesn't mean that it has to be like that forever. And the only problem is that we have to find a form of governance at a global level that won't be entrapped within the old Granville system.
Yeah.
So you have to. It's a trap. We have to be very aware and careful. But some people are thinking about, for instance, ecological communities all over the planet, and so we wouldn't need a chief of planet Earth or something like that, perhaps, because we would be interconnected, but we don't need a president of the World Federation, or governments could be different.
Yeah.
Some people have ideas about that, and the activists in this field, and they are already proposing new models.
For sure, yeah, it's something I've been spending a lot of time with, sort of behind the scenes as well. Like, what would government look like? What would this feel like? And it, when you're in a different way of seeing the world, and you're looking at it and saying, well, what really would we need? One of the big questions that you start to come to is, we're currently, we have one foot in one world and one foot in another, let's say, right?
Yeah.
And this is part of the challenge, is we have to go through a transition from our systems and infrastructure point of view, where there's some of us that are starting to experience this state of consciousness on a much bigger way, but there's a lot of us still that are not quite there. And it's not like people who are experiencing it judge the other people. It's like, well, we all want to go there together, we all want to get there together, but how do we assist that process, and then how do we transition our physical structures to match this? And it just leads to a blunder of questions that can sometimes be very overwhelming, but when you remain playful with it, it's sort of this fun experience, and it begs this sort of initial question that I'm going to pose to you, which is, if people are maybe hearing what we're saying and they totally resonate. They're like, yes, I experience these states of consciousness. I totally envision this, new beautiful world. There's others who might be looking at it going, I kind of hear what you guys are saying. I may not fully be able to relate to it, and I might be curious, like, what do those states of consciousness feel like, and how might I be able to explore these myself? How do I break down some of these veils? From you and your research and your experience, do you have ways, or do you have anything to recommend to people where?
Well, yes. Before I was talking about an alteration of the electrical chemical activity in the brain. So you can reach that state, and you can be guided by other people, and that's you see in various traditions. So you can, if you're not, used to certain substances that are called entheogens, so they lead to the God within. They were called before psychedelics in the 60s and the 70s, opening the psyche. You can be guided by experienced people with that, and if you are not too fearful, and if you control the breathing and so on and so forth, and you can have very significant mystical experience that will change forever your outlook on life. That's what from the control, the breathing exercises also, that it's been developed widely in the pranayama tradition of India for thousands of years. And they have various techniques to reach different goals, including these experiences also. So that's another way. You can also ask for it. You can send the intention clearly that the kind of experience that you would like to have. Mm-hmm. Very often, it will come back. Yeah. People sometimes forget, and in certain cases, it might take a few years, but eventually, I receive testimonies like that it's a possibility. And so these techniques are, well, especially with the substances, it has to be done carefully, under guidance, at least at first. But I'm not willing to put implants in the brain to produce such experiences because of the other problems that might be associated with it. So, and we don't have any clue that this is possible. The proponents of AI, they are more interested in terms of boosting our cognitive capacities, problem solving, for instance, learning, creativity to a certain extent, but they never talk about emotions, compassion, empathy, because it doesn't exist. Yeah. And for them, and it's not important, and that's why they see them very easily merging with machines.
Yeah.
But in spiritual people, very rarely you will encounter somebody who is spiritual and at the same time who wants to receive implants, who wants to become a cyborg. Spirituality has been talking about a form of transhumanism, expanding consciousness of Homo sapiens for thousands of years.
Yeah.
They didn't use the term transhumanism, but in reality, the ultimate transhumanism for me is the spiritual transformation.
Sure.
And when you undergo spiritual transformation, many things changes. They change in your brain in terms of brain activity, neurotransmitters, electrical processes. you change the expression of your genes, certain hormones, and so on and so forth. So to me, that's the ideal form of, if you want to use this concept of
Yeah.
reaching another level.
Yeah, it's like evolving the human experience from a point of consciousness, as opposed to evolving the human experience through
Right.
logical and mental processes that are built from a limited state of consciousness and being and thinking, right? And that's a fascinating thing. And one thing I was thinking when you were talking about some of the previous stuff with regards to having experiences and asking for it, and the asking part of it, I find to be so potent at the moment. And even for the last, I think I've been saying this for about 4 or 5 years, where it feels like energetically on the planet, there's the potency for change is so high that
it's greater. Yes.
yeah, that it's like
Yeah.
the need, that veil between our current state of consciousness and experiencing others is thinning, right? It's thinning. And so to have these mystical experiences, to sometimes they just happen by accident to people, and other times it's almost like just ask, like set the intention, allow it to show up however it would, because right now, the deeper aspect of you, your soul is asking for the change, and it's about, are you going to have the sort of the mental awareness to say, hey, I'm going to tune into that experience. It's like I'm going to tune the radio to opening up to that experience versus staying everyday life, everything that's been, in my reality, I'm just going to focus on that. But going back to expanding reality, right? Am I open to expanding that perception?
But I receive a lot of testimonies from people around the world telling exactly what you're saying, that it's more easy to connect with the spiritual realm, and that our capacity to alter physical reality through intention, for instance, is it's more obvious, and it's quicker also.
Yeah.
People see that a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, I find the like the speed of manifestation, if you will, when it aligns with what's truly serving to your journey of evolution, is very quick. When you are trying to manifest, and this is kind of one of the big topics I'm working on behind the scenes as well, when we're trying to manifest and create consciously, things that come from the old story, the old human story of like, I need to obtain wealth, I need to obtain this, I need to obtain material, it doesn't really go, because the deeper aspect of you is saying, how is that going to serve you to go there? How is that really what your journey is about? You talked about soul contracts, which let's dive into that a little bit if we can. I know we don't have too much time left, but going into the soul contracts, expand upon that. What have you found with that, and what does that sort of mean in the context of one's life?
Okay, you've heard about the life review during near-death experience. So it's a bit the same concept, but so you're and it's been reported by people undergoing spiritual hypnosis and going between. They go, they can experience previous lives, but also lives between lives. So the space in between two incarnations. And apparently, and we have thousands of accounts of that obtained by the creators of spiritual hypnosis, Michael Newton, Doris Cannon also. The people report that before the incarnation, you have to choose the goals, grosso modo, grossly, what do you want to develop or acquire in terms of attributes, patience, capacity to love, for instance, and stuff like that. But also some events, very important events, like what we're experiencing right now. It's part of the deal. What you choose to do, what you choose to learn, and what you're going to do regarding other people. What will be your impact, and so on. So yes, a lot of feedback that I get from people all over the planet is exactly what you say. That if they are not aligned with their impression of their mission on life, manifestation doesn't work, or it works, but not very well.
Yeah.
But if they are perfectly aligned, it's like magic.
Yeah, it's sort of the missing layer to the secret, and
Yes.
there's a lot of work that's done where people are talking about how, well, if you do meditation and you get into this state of complete neutrality, you can create anything, and there's truth to that, but there's also this layer of you mentioned, it's like, well, sometimes you come to experience something to obtain a specific lesson out of it, and you can try and manifest your way out of the experience, but if you haven't grasped the lesson, it will stick around, right? And so it's almost like there's no amount of manifesting that will move you past something that you really sort of need to gain the clarity on. And the work of Joe Dispenza, for example, he talks about a lot of this stuff, but he says, my success rate's only about 25% in getting people to overcome certain things. And I often wonder whether the other 75%, I mean, this is what intuitively aligns with myself when I look into this, is whether the other 75% is that, within the person's soul contract, their mission, they're trying to necessarily move past something that they haven't grasped that full lesson on yet. And I'm curious how many times you've...
Yeah, that's exactly what I think. But it's not been, there's no study of this yet.
Right.
But it'd be very interesting to, because it can be verified empirically.
Yeah.
It could be very interesting in the future to verify this.
Needs some deeper research, it sounds like.
Yes.
But isn't it interesting, the idea of, in a lot of cases we intuitively know something, but the mental side of us also wants to understand it through study. And I'm going to ask you this question because it's I've been playing with this thought a lot. I sometimes feel we want to study it, not to affirm it for ourselves when we intuitively know, but because there's such a big portion of our story and our history and our population that is very much in that state of consciousness where it requires that mental replication, right? And so I wonder, as we evolve through this, is there going to be, and we become more in tune with our authentic self, if you will, is the need and the desire for such empirical results, is it going to diminish, you feel?
Oh, yes. And as for me, it's like that. All the major insights that I've had throughout my life, it was through intuition. And I want to, so I agree with you. Personally, I wouldn't need to conduct science projects. However, science has replaced religion as the ultimate cognitive authority in terms of knowledge.
Yeah.
So you can, now we have to do that. We have to use it to convince people that this is reality. But eventually, I'm sure it will vanish.
Yeah. It's interesting. I know, it's like, as you say that, I think to myself, all the people who are like going, oh my God, but it's the greatest gift to humanity, science, right? And I say, there's been so many incredible things and it's helped our evolution, but eventually we evolve beyond stuff, right? And I think this is the beauty of right now, is we're in this process of letting go of the old stories, letting go of the story that has shaped humanity up to this point, knowing that it's okay to evolve. And I guess to end this off, I'd love to hear some thoughts from you as to what could the world look like moving forward if we decide to create from this beautiful state of consciousness that's emerging within us?
Yeah. Well, I think the United Nations would disappear. We wouldn't need agencies like United Nations and the World Health Organization. Central banking also would disappear because it's a form of economic slavery. For instance, in Canada, 80% of the income taxes, it's for reimbursing the debt, the collective amount of money that we owe to these. So we'll never be able to reimburse them. It's it's a slavery system.
Yeah.
And in the new world we're talking that we can see already emerging, there's no place for this. There's no. I don't think. I think we need to change our relationship with regard to money. Is money in that kind of world? Would money be necessary? I don't. I'm not sure about this. But we would have to find forms of exchange. But I think that we would organize ourselves in terms of communities
Yeah.
locally, although we would be interconnected at
Global level.
globally. Uh, but many things would change, like also the reliance on big pharma and all these big structures that really belong to the old world, the archaic, based on power, and greed, and
Yeah.
manipulation, and they don't have any place in this new world. But I know that there will be a transition period, and it will be. It may be rough at certain times,
Yeah.
but we have to get there, and many more people are awakening to this. And for once, I'm very optimistic about
Hmm.
this major shift in terms of people all along the human history who were suffering because of the political structures of the time or economic structures. They always thought about a better future.
Hmm.
And they thought you can go back to few thousands of years at the time of Jesus Christ, for instance, and the people in Judea, and they were thinking about freeing themselves from the Romans and a fairer world and justice, and it's been like that all throughout history. But now, for us, we may see that for the first time in at least the known history of humans, because some people are arguing that there have been many cycles of humanity.
Yeah.
But for this cycle, I'm starting to believe more and more that we'll see that, because more and more people want that.
Yeah.
And, we are billions of people that want that versus a very small number of individuals who try to control humankind.
Yeah. And I think this is the importance of these conversations and conscious media in general, is the idea that instead of just talking about our current woes politically, economically, societally, from this standpoint of keeping it within the system, but just changing the system.
Right.
We're talking about this from a standpoint of, okay, that's the system. We played with that. But does it resonate with you to really continue just making small adjustments to it? Or are we capable of something totally different? It's like creating a space for people to feel okay to explore that side of them, to
Yes.
ask themselves these questions, because you ask people all the time, and when you're a kid, it's like, well, do we really have to have the world like this? Like, can't we just change it? And as we grow up, we start saying, well, no, you can't, because this structure and that. But it's like, yeah, but we made it all up, right? So of course we could change it. And I feel like we kind of have to get into that playful state again of viewing the world in that way.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for doing this with us. This was a fantastic conversation. I think exploring these new ideas and ways of looking at things is really important right now. So I appreciate the work that you're doing. And would love to have you back anytime you want to share anything else.
Yes. No. Well, let's say don't live in fear, and let's be hopeful for the future. And we don't want to. We don't wait after other people to create this future. It's we all have to do that ourselves as co-creators of this. Yeah. It's a matter of conscious evolution, and so we're all, if we are united, we're more powerful, and so that's why I think it's very, at this point, it's very important to communicate between ourselves, to become more one.
Yeah.
an alliance of conscious spiritual people. At this point in time, I think it's very important for the future of humanity.
Beautiful. Well said.
Okay.
Awesome.
Take care, Joe.
Yep. You as well.